law, as some of you may know, is my second career. I spent my first career working for the Four Seasons Hotel in Boston. And over the course of being a lawyer and going through law school, I've learned a few things. I've picked up some things on what can be done, what should be done, how to better take care of clients. And really the purpose of this talk is to go through what did I learn there. And here are some ideas, and it also happens to qualify for ethics credit if you are interested in that. See, a few years per when I say that. Okay, yeah, sure. At some point, I can keep going without the slides. It's only moderately important. A lot of what we see is that, while this is geared more for attorneys, it applies to any professional services firm. Because for most of our professional services jobs, folks are going from high school, college, maybe some grad school, and then directly into an employment situation where they may not have had a long-term job where they weren't the professional. Now, in a law firm, you'll typically hear the first or second year associate say that they're at the bottom of the pile, thinking, just because they know the least, they have the least experience, they're at the bottom of the totem pole. In some cases, that's true. In a law firm, typically the paralegal will be able to outvote or outrank the first year associate because they've been doing it for decades. They know a lot more about what's going on than that first year. They can say, look, this is how we need to do it. Eventually, though, that young attorney will get more and more knowledge and be able to outvote, outrank the paralegal of what's happening or the admin assistant, whoever it is. But what they don't have is kind of the grounding in what it takes to take care of them. That's okay, well, that's fine. The way that services have been marketed and sold for years, though, is that we've been able to say, well, we're in our special niche. There really isn't a whole lot of competition for us. We don't need to worry about the service that we're delivering. We just need to provide the service and people will beat a path to our door. I was told by a friend and a mentor before I even went to law school, like those days were long gone, and this was in the early 2000s when I was just thinking about law school. The fact that you just open your door, hang out a shingle is not going to be enough. You had to have a business plan. You had to know more about business and how to run your business. You couldn't just rely on the fact that you were a lawyer and selling your services to be fine. That's especially true now. I mean, for me as a lawyer, I've got other businesses creeping in, trying to take away the low-end work that they think we won't care about. The legal Zooms coming in and saying, well, here are the basic forms, we can take care of this for people. Here are other ways of doing the work that you shouldn't be doing. And frankly, some of that work we probably don't need to be doing as an attorney charging hourly for it. But the option is out there for clients. They have more than one option. It may not always be, they may not be able to go to a non-legal provider, but there are plenty of other lawyers competing with me on doing things that I could do as well. So it's not just that I have the competent skills to help them with their problems. It's, if they've got the option, I should be able to treat them a little better, so I can stand out and be a differentiator, and have that as a differentiator between me and another law firm. And I've seen this where just new clients are coming in, they can't get a hold of the lawyer who drafted the wills for somebody who just died, and they're searching for somebody who will respond to them. Just kind of shocking things of how, I'm not trying to blast the entire profession, but some lawyers think that they don't have to respond timely, think that they don't need to take care of their clients beyond just performing the service. The reality is the market is shifting for lawyers, and assuming for accountants as well. If you're not going to take care of your clients, then it's not going to work very well for you. You're going to be left behind, and there are other providers who are going to be willing to take care of your clients for you. So, I was hoping to have some statistics up here showing exactly what the grievance rate is for attorneys in certain practice areas. One of the nice things was that of the top 5 grievance areas from the statistics from the bar, tax wasn't on there, neither was estate planning, so I feel like I'm in the clear there. Nobody in here probably was in those top 5 grievance areas. The way the numbers look on the slides, they actually come through as 100% of those top 5. They don't include any of the other practice areas. So that's why it adds up to 100. I'm sure there are a grievance or two in probate tax, but it didn't work out there. You'll also see that there are grievance statistics on what those top areas for a grievance are, as well as top areas for a sanction. So the difference being where are the complaints coming from initially, and then ultimately once the board has looked at it, who's getting fined or having some sort of disciplinary action brought against them, resulting in a punishment. And the top one is communication issues. It has nothing to do with technical skill or ability, and even the top 5 skills that are in there are not about technical ability. It's all about what the lawyer is doing and how they are treating their clients. Are they responding quickly, or as the number 3 complaint is and grievance, are they neglecting? There are issues with integrity, which there's no presentation I can really give to address somebody's integrity issues, but that's the idea. That one's beyond what I can do, but neglect and communication are things that would be addressed by having a better and more robust service presence for your clients. Well, what can we do with that? What is it about? As a lawyer, I went and kind of thought about this and thinking about this for a while. I reduced it down to a definition with 4 parts, and the 4th part having 2 subparts because it looks like a lawyer definition. So customer service really is about the experience that a business is providing, and not to its customers only, but it's that experience that it's providing beyond its technical product and its physical product. Because what comes out from any business is not just widgets. It's kind of a combination of various percentages of what they do. And so there's a physical product of what is the stuff, the physical things you can reach out and pick up that comes out of the business. For a restaurant, that's plate of food, the interior decor, the uniforms, what's going on physically that you can touch and see, and that experience from the business. The technical product, which for a restaurant would be, the skills, the recipes, things like that go in. And then finally the service, which ultimately is getting delivered by the people in that business. And that's the key. The service is coming from the people. It's not coming from the physical product. It's not coming from the technical knowledge. It's coming from the people in that business. They're coming in, and they're the ones who are interfacing with the clients or the customers or whatever you feel like calling them. Because it doesn't matter. The people who are paying your bills, they're the ones who need to be taken care of. And to the extent that you are focusing on them because they have the choice and they can take their dollars and give them to another provider if they're not being treated well, then they can and they will do that. So what you need to do is focus on how do you get your people more in line so that they're figuring out what they can do and how they can take better care of your clients. So, again, a little bit more on that. The technical product for us, here we're all providing tax knowledge in one way or another. That's very technical product where we are spending time to develop that. The fact that we're providing a product that has a great value to our clients, we're either getting them out of problems that cost a lot of money, or we're helping prevent problems or save tax dollars at the front end, doesn't mean that there's not a value to that. It's saying that we have this value that we need to provide to people. That is where a lot of what we have comes in. But the reality is, we've been in this room for a day and a half now, sharing ideas and secrets and things that we know will work to help our clients do better. So in a lot of cases, there's a lot that we can do, but even amongst us, the abilities that we have may not be very different on a technical perspective from the abilities that can be delivered by the person sitting to your left or your right, even if you're married. Because we have a married couple here. But the idea is that there are a lot of providers who can do a lot of good things. Even within our niche community, we're providing, a lot of us can do a lot of different things, but there's still other options for people. If you're looking for more big four accounting firm, you can go to one of those 4, even if you need that. If you need a mid-sized firm, there are options there. Okay, well that's one thing, That's not what that client service is. That technical knowledge isn't the service aspect. You can't rely on it and say, well, I give great service because my product is great. You can't also say that, I've got the fanciest furniture or, the 100-weight paper that my people, or, people sign their documents on expensive paper. That means my service is great. That doesn't change anything. I've asked my friends who are probate litigators who are arguing over wills, has the quality of the paper ever made a difference in whether or not a will was admitted or challenged or otherwise seen as being valid? They couldn't think of a case where it mattered, and it really shouldn't. Reducing that document down, people are going to sign something. If their tax return is printed on copy paper or if it's printed on gold leaf, does it really make a difference? No. It's adding to a cost to the bottom line that probably doesn't provide much of a benefit. If you think about what happens when you go to a hotel, the basic transaction that goes on is pretty standard. You pay for a room for the night. If you're staying at a Four Seasons or Best Western or anything else, and there are different ranges. I worked with Four Seasons for years. I would much rather stay there than anywhere else, but I don't always because it's not always feasible. But there are certain things that I know if I'm going to a hotel, I am going to pay and the room will be quiet and clean, hopefully, when I shut my eyes. If I open my eyes up in a Four Seasons, it will look and kind of smell a certain clean way, versus if I go to a lower end motel on the side of the road. You probably all stayed in that motel and know that kind of generic smell of cleaner and hotel. And I can see somebody laughing in the back. There is a smell to certain classes of hotels that is just what that experience is. And you kind of know where you end up in there. And it's that level that you can differentiate on in your own practice, knowing that, look, that's the physical aspect of it, but what it's ultimately doing is conveying value silently to your clients about what you are and who you are and if you know what you're doing. If clients are calling in and you're hemming and hawing, you have no idea what's going on, you're shuffling all the time, every time, because you have to figure out who they are and what they are. And it's not just you, but it's also your staff. They don't know what's going on. You're communicating something differently than if people can get you on the phone regularly and easily to where when they get there, you know what's going on, you have an idea, and you're ready to respond to them. So what we're ended up looking at is how do we silently communicate that value and that competence that we've developed through our technical skills. They're coming to us for the technical skills, but we want to kind of reinforce those technical skills and not make them question us based on their experience with us. What can we do to think about that? And of course I've left my phone. How much time do I have? 30 minutes. 30 minutes, geez. Flying along. So there's a lot that can go into this. There are so many things that we want to go into how we design our practice and what we can do to bring this along so that people know that what we're doing is there for them and it's not just an accident. We didn't kind of luck into this practice area. We've developed these skills. How do we bring that along? Because otherwise, we end up reverting to our lowest level of training, which for many of us, because this is our first job, it's all focused on those technical skills and not on the service skills that, frankly, lawyers and doctors and accountants and the rest don't get a whole lot of training, if any. Even at the big firms, the big law firms downtown have all sorts of training programs for their technical skills. They don't have anything on how do you respond to people in a way that makes them understand what you're doing. How do you communicate the value silently of what you are doing? And how you can make sure that that client doesn't think something, think along the lines of, do we need to go elsewhere because this person doesn't know what they're doing? So, what can we do on that? At the front end, we have to think about, well, what is, I've had one definition of service, but, and you'll see this in the materials, I break it down into three large areas. You start first with people. Jerry Riskin is somebody who is a law firm advisor. He provides guidance and consulting to firms. His metaphor is that your people need to be on the bus. They have to be on the bus in terms of being part of your team, and they have to have that certain mindset. There are certain people who just may never get that they need to be nice. You may have worked with one of these people once, where it's just no matter what happens, they're always going to be sour about what's happening. It's always happening to them, not for them or by them, or as a result of what's going on. These are people, it's a kind of broad brush to say that there are some people who just may not get it. You have to figure out, well, how do we get those people either out of the business if they're in there now, because you're going to need all of your people on board with this. Because you can't make exceptions for the one person, I'm sorry, you had to talk to Bill today. Make sure you don't talk to Bill's client when you call in. Talk to anybody else. Or make sure calls never end up in his desk. At the hotel, one of the things that we had, it was everybody was responsible for their own, everybody was responsible for upholding the same standards across the hotel. It didn't matter if you were working at the front desk or the pool, or the front drive, housekeeping, or if you were in the back of the house in sales, upper management, or accounting. Everybody was expected to handle those same tasks in the same way and be pleasant to everybody, both inside and out. Because what you can't have is you can't have the mistake where, oh, I'm sorry, I treated somebody as though they were just an employee, or I wasn't thinking about it. It's the people who are going to remember that this is the same way that you treat everybody inside and out, inside the business, outside the business, all the time. So having those people with that mindset, start to finish, because they're going to be there always for you, until they leave for whatever reason. You can't have those people who aren't going to be on board and being able to deliver great service for you, whatever that's going to look like. Right? For us, when I was trained on how to interview people, so much of it was we can't take in people who don't have certain basic skills that we have to have. We can train you on almost anything. If you want to be head chef at Four Seasons, it'll take more time than if you were coming out of culinary school. But we can train you to do that. Whatever that skill is, we can get you. The head, one of the higher-ups in the accounting department had started off and he had developed his skills and had started working in accounting and had moved up through the ranks and had transferred through multiple hotels. But the hotel had supported him in developing those skills. He didn't have them, but he got them. The skills, those technical skills that he needed for running books, he developed. It was the mindset of knowing that he could have that the hotel was looking for. They will get you the skills that you want if you want them. Beyond that, we need, or at the baseline, we're not going to let you in the door if you don't have that basic mindset that we need. After the people, it's the delivery. How is it coming across to people? How are your people delivering the service to your clients? What does that look like? The aspects of when people are interacting with your business, interacting with those humans, what does it look like? Easy thing to pick up is start with smiles. It's really easy to start every interaction, even ones that will go poorly, because some of our conversations are going to be difficult. Whether we're going to have to deliver bad news. This is not to brighten over or kind of pay over and say, well, look, I'll just never deliver any bad news. I'll make sure I always have a perfect result for clients. We'll make mistakes. We'll have bad news. Whatever that is. If we start it in a better position and just knowing I have to begin that way, or at least when somebody calls me, I'm not mad at them for calling. It's kind of the other way to see it. We need to have everything structured in a way that we're going to take care of them, and so what they experience is pleasant from their experience. Finally, you have to set everything up in such a way that it's not just, well, I think Bill did all right on this. How do we measure what that experience was? On phone calls at the hotel, we knew people were going to call them. There were standards across the board of exactly what had to happen and how it had to happen. If a phone call came in, it wasn't answer the phones. It's phone calls are expected to be answered within 3 rings. Why? Well, it's easier to say, well, was this 3 rings more or less? There wasn't anybody calling, there wasn't anybody internally who was going to be checking. You just knew 3 rings, you had to pick it up. It gave you time to not drop everything, but it also gave you time to realize if somebody's in front of you, it can ring once, that's your alert that you need to excuse yourself at least momentarily, answer the phone, and then either place them on hold or offer the call back. But knowing, like, this is the range of options. 3 rings to get something out. Room service, knowing we want to get it up quickly, it's got to be up there in a set amount of time. The time, though, like all of this, I mean, it gets adapted to every business and every particular situation because my practice is different than any of yours. But beyond that, for other firms doing completely different work, they're going to have different ideas about how they're going to deliver it. And so you would want to have adapt these standards so that it makes sense for your business. But in the sense of, well, if we're going to, back at the room service, we expect it to be up in 30 minutes. But there's always the chance for rush, some sort of rush to come in and say, all right, well, we know if you're calling on a Friday night, it's probably going to be more busy. It's football weekend in Austin right now. There are going to be people driving to Austin, staying there for the football game. I can tell you right now, there is going to be a rush on room service between 1:15 and 2:15 in the morning. And starting at about 1:55, people are going to start calling down and say, can you send beer out? And they will say no, because they won't be able to deliver it within the time period needed for them to not be caught out by the 2 a.m. stop service rules. Now, certain people have learned that, we'll just send it up at, call in at midnight, even if they're outside of the hotel, they will send it up. They'd be happy to send it up at midnight and let it sit there for you. But just knowing, you would have to adapt to whatever those rules are. So, adapting to the situation, letting, if we know that we're going to have a rush, people would be alerted. It's going to be busy later on tonight. A lot of the people who are going to stay at that hotel have stayed there multiple times and probably have a good idea of what their need for late night services, as an example, are going to be. They can pick up and know from their previous experiences, but for the folks who haven't, because the hotel knows who has stayed there, they can see when they've stayed there, why they've stayed there, is it business or is it pleasure? Are these people who've been staying multiple times for football weekends? We'll go ahead and make sure that they know. We know these clients are going to need more room service, or more likely to need room service. We can see, based on volume, who's going to be ordering what. Those past orders, we can adapt and see what is needed for those clients and then provide them with the feedback of, yes, of course, we would happily take care of this room service order for you. But we need you to know that because of X, Y, and Z, it will now take this. And part of that is just saying, look, this, kind of giving them the understanding of knowing this is what it will take, and this is when you should be ready to receive something from me. Giving those deadlines so it sets up the expectation not only for the client, but it also sets the reasonable deadline for us. If we're promising to have something to a client, we need to make sure that it's not just what it sounds good to them. We need to make sure that it's something we can actually deliver. I found both in the hotel and since I've been practicing, most folks will believe and accept most deadlines that are reasonable. If you tell them, look, it will take me this long to get this drafted, they're not asking why, if you're spending 8 hours a day, why is it going to take you 2 weeks? They understand they're not the only client. If you give them the reasonable time of, it'll take a few weeks, it'll take another month for me to get this for whatever reason, the people generally will listen and respond to it. It also gives them the deadline of knowing, if John told me he'd have it on the 15th by the close of the business day, I don't need to worry about peppering him with questions of why isn't it ready yet until it starts getting close to the end of the business day on the 15th. Setting out that reasonable expectation, making it easy for the client to know, even if they've got a tense situation, that they can come in and figure out, well, this is what we need to do. Then this, this is what I'm going to deliver. This is the time I'm going to deliver it by. They can reasonably measure, and that's what you as the owner can measure of. We set this deadline. Did we meet it? Did we beat it by a day? Did we by 1%, or did we go over? Did we go over? Well, why did we go over? Was there something else that went in? And that's kind of the key is the management trope of what gets measured gets managed. What gets measured gets managed is part of it, of knowing that if you can measure that thing, it's then less airy-fairy and more, Bill smiled when he picked up the phone. We could hear that through the phone call because he wasn't just like, hello, what do you want? It was, good afternoon. This is Bill, how can I help you? Being able to quantify, this is what we're looking for, and measure. Did they use their name when they answered the phone? Because the standard there is, well, you're trying to make it easy for this person. They've picked up the phone. If somebody has picked up the phone and called us, as the service provider, we're not going to be able to figure out who they are until they tell us. And if we have more than one person in our office, they're not going to be able to figure out who we are until we have identified ourselves to them. So by making sure that we're answering the phone in a way that says, here, this is who I am, you at least know who you are. And you may have made a phone call. I know when I called to schedule things with other providers, like call to schedule a haircut. I've called not knowing who was on the phone because I don't recognize the voices or they sound enough alike in barbershop, for example, that I couldn't tell that I was talking to the receptionist or my barber, and it wasn't until after I talked to him for a minute that I realized that I was talking to the guy who's been cutting my hair for 5 years. I just didn't recognize it. Versus, and then before I got to that point, I'd spent more time than I should have explaining who I was, what I wanted, and when I needed it, versus if he had just said, this is Bill. Oh, hi, John. I could have cut to the end, scheduled my appointment, and moved on much faster instead of feeling, I didn't recognize Bill's name, or I didn't recognize his voice. And now I kind of, it made the experience less easy for me. Because again, putting it a different way, it's about making it easy for the clients. How do we say, this is what we need from you, we're going to go do our work, and then we'll come back and you will review these returns all the way through, because you're expected to, even if it's 100 pages long. Read every bit, tell us everything that we need to know, but making it as easy as possible for them. Certain things aren't going to be easy for them. That 100-page tax return, there's almost no way to make it easy, but we can take as much friction out of it as possible by figuring out what we can do for the clients up front. How can we structure it so that it's easier for them? Another way to do that, make sure that you're asking all the information up front and in one place, instead of coming back time and time again. If you're going to be forming that business, for us, all right, well, we know, we focus first, it seems like, on, well, what's the structure? Let's get that all drilled in, and then we run off, we've got to get these forms. Well, we've got these questions. We come and ask the questions we need to fill out, the initial minutes and the forms with the Secretary of State to get everything up and running. We forgot, we're going to need to get an EIN. Well, who's going to be this responsible party? Who's going to do this, this, and this? And each time we're coming back, we're making a small signal to our client that, do we know what we're doing? Sure, we had the formation started and all the tax formation issues done. But if we couldn't remember, we're going to need to ask for this address and what's your local address going to be, who's going to be the responsible party, if it wasn't clear the first time. It's just a slight eroding of what they can think of us and what we could be doing versus coming in, here, we're going to have a bunch of questions. You may not see why now, client, but I promise you, we're going to need all this information at some point through the representation. Now, it doesn't stop you from, well, if you've changed the facts, you're changing the facts and we need to change how we're going to respond to you later. We may have something else that we need to pull up for you. Or we may realize that there is a change in law, so we need to change how this gets structured. Maybe that changes where we're going to do other things. But knowing, all right, well, if we're going to form a basic business, here's the 15 pieces of information. You know, if I'm drafting a will, here are the first round of questions, and knowing that they may drive additional questions. You know, but for all those basic questions, what are all the second order effects of what we're asking? We're asking you to name an executor or a trustee, or whatever position it is. What other information do we need about that person? Do we need to make sure that we're asking, are they a U.S. person? When I'm helping people name trustees, well, for a client who already has international connections, I need to be making sure to ask, is this person a non-resident? Because if they are, that's going to cause issues. That's going to have some very definite tax issues if they live outside the U.S. And similarly, if we're naming guardians for children, well, if you live here, but the people who you want to take care of your children live in a different state or a different country, what happens during the interim when they're either waiting to catch a plane? Who's going to be in charge of the kids in the meantime? Just knowing to think about, well, what are those knock-on effects, so you can convey and make it as easy as possible for your clients to come in, do whatever they need to with you, work with you, and then move on.
It's also important to recognize that you're not going to make every client happy.
What?
Yep. I hate to tell you this, but you're not. B, sometimes that may mean that you do have to possibly reorganize staff just because of human interpersonal relationships. And C, sometimes you just need to find clients. Mm-hmm. Because it's the old 80-20 rule. 20% of your clients are going to give you 80% of your problem. And maybe the solution isn't necessarily working harder, but getting a better client. So it's just not always a fit because it is a personal relationship business.
It is for a lot of what we're doing. For what we're doing, for what I'm doing especially. Like, I've got my list of red flags for clients. We had somebody called a few weeks ago with an employment tax problem because he had a nanny he hadn't paid correctly. He had paid her, but never reported tax. And well, what do we do with this? And, the red flag started even before we got to me talking to this person, because he wouldn't give us an email address. He wouldn't give us an email. He called in, spoke to the receptionist. They took some information. He refused to give an email address. He gave a name. He didn't correct the people when they spelled his name back to him. Doing some digging, we saw that he had a unique spelling for his name. Because I was like, this is odd. Who is this guy? Drop his name. Bill Smith, Houston, Texas. Looked on LinkedIn, looked in the property tax records. Just kind of knowing, because this is going to be a personal representation, he's got some tax issues. It kind of set me up of, this is not a client for me, probably. How can I still be nice to him? Because you never know. He might have other problems, but also being able to go back and say, well, all right, let me help you. But also, this was enough of a red flag to where I can just say, go talk to your CPA first. If this is, based on the numbers he was giving me in terms of what he thought he owed and what he paid and what that tax obligation was going to be versus his total tax bill, he probably doesn't need my help. Hopefully he doesn't. But that's also part of it, of just knowing where, you have to draw your lines. Because if you keep letting your clients draw those lines for you, they'll keep pushing them further and further. And so, it really does come down to, well, you've got to know what it looks like. You have to end up basically designing your process. I've got, for my intake process, like a 5-page sheet of, these are all the ways that clients could potentially contact me the first time. If they call the main line, what's going to happen? What does it look like from their side when they pick up the phone? Okay, they could also email me. I could have somebody schedule an appointment with me directly off the web. I could have another advisor call me directly. I could have the person, this potential client, get my direct line from one of y'all, and they call me directly on my direct line. what does it look like? How can I make sure that I know what that experience looks like so that it's the same every time? Because it's not just, I don't want to have the one the high moment where I took great care of somebody once. I want to be able to repeat that time and time again. They call in, if you call the main line, it should look like this. When once we get that basic information, they're still not in the door as a client. They just scheduled the time to talk to either me or my paralegal. What information are we getting at that time? What does it look like when we're done with that initial stage of initial contact, then initial screening by my paralegal to make sure, beyond just not being secretive about their information, I want to make sure that they're going to be nice people to me and her. That's just as important to me because I don't want to undermine my relationship with Heather, my paralegal, by, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to deal with Mr. Smith. He's a jerk, but he pays us well. I'm at the point now where I can say, he's not worth it, and I don't have any clients that are so big that I'm going to participate in that. I mean, at the hotel, we had the same thing. There were rules. We would let our boundary, we knew what the boundaries were. There were very definitely people who had been told never to come back, no matter how much they had spent. They had crossed certain lines that I'm not going to explain here on camera. But, there were things that you could do to be told to never come back to the hotel. And there were other things where we would just be very firm but direct of knowing, certain behavior by you as a customer or client or guest won't be tolerated. So, and it's not just that it's you as the technical professional in the business know what these are, but also knowing that, that you've communicated that to your assistants or the secretaries or, whatever they're called, knowing that if they see that, that's also something that should be brought to you so that it can be corrected, or, either by letting the client know that's inappropriate, or by letting the client know that they need to go elsewhere. And then just having those lines drawn and knowing, sometimes you will have to say, look, we're just going to take it this one time because this is just a weird situation. There was one time where I ended up having to call the SWAT team in on a guest at the hotel. This was at the end of a very long night where somebody had just kind of progressively gotten, it was a combination of multiple things, underlying psychoses plus chemicals, plus an empty hotel, and, we were able to focus on her more than she probably preferred. And it ultimately led to a situation where she had said some things where, the first time she said it, I was like, I'm just going to let that go. When she then said, don't let anybody knock on my door, otherwise I'm going to shoot them, that is when I called the hotel manager and let them know that, we talked about me calling the police, I couldn't do it. I'm just letting you know. I'm going to hang up the phone and call the police, and they're going to deal with the situation that is now out of my control. Just knowing that there were certain precautions in place, the expectation was we weren't going to call the cops ever at the hotel because we had in-house security who could deal with it. But at that point, we'd been dealing with her for 6 hours, and all of us were, we had put up and provided more service to her than we had really expected, and then she had crossed the line we really couldn't let her cross. And so it's just knowing that sometimes, yes, you will deliver more service than you expected, but other times, there's no amount of service that you're going to provide because you're going to have to make those lines and draw those lines. So with the few minutes that I have left, the few things that you think about, one, starting with that smile. The Four Seasons had its own service acronym. It was service spelled out. It was in 3-foot high letters down the main hallway that everybody walked in. The first letter was of service was for smile. Second was eye contact. Just making sure that the person on the other side, if they're down like this the entire time, or if I've been presenting like this for the entire time, you wouldn't think that I was doing the same job that I am by trying to make eye contact with you. When you walk into a restaurant, if you go to a store, if the person's not focusing on you, you just don't think that they're doing something for you. It's just kind of, I'll get to you when I can. So, smile, eye contact, R for recognize, for recognition, making sure that to the extent that we can recognize who you are, not only as a returning client, but just using your name. Making sure you, V for voice, it's okay to not know everything, but you should at least be somewhat confident, can't be, talking at your shoes again. SERVI, informed, knowing what was going on in the hotel. There was a daily sheet that came out so that everybody in the hotel knew who was coming in, who was leaving, what events were happening. So when you got those regular questions of, where is this event, the right person, oh, it's in that room, it's in this hall. And to get there, these are the directions that you get there. C, everything had to be clean. That doesn't make, shouldn't surprise you. Cleanliness, again, another silent way of saying, or communicating to people, you know what you're doing. If everything is a catastrophe when you walk in, it's harder to believe that that person knows what they're doing and has command of everything going on if there are papers everywhere. If it looks like a mess, it just silently undermines what you're doing versus if it's clean and everything is there. Finally, the E, the last E was for everyone. Again, everyone had to be on board. That was how the Four Seasons implemented it. Ritz has their own version of it. They have their own mission statements. But that was the thing. It was painted in 3-foot high letters as you walked in the door, so you saw it every day. It was that important. Unlike us, they didn't have a license that they could protect. Sure, they have the license to serve alcohol, but anybody could open a hotel, and they had no monopoly on what they were providing. So, smiling will be number 1. 2, empowering the employees to the extent that our licenses allow them to be empowered to provide answers to clients. Having people, I've done my best to set up so that if you call me, you don't end up in voicemail unless you want to end up in voicemail. You have to proactively ask to leave a message in that way, because what I want people to do is schedule a call so that they know when they can get a hold of me. Finally, just systematizing, knowing what things look like. What does this process look like for a client? When they come in for basic estate planning, what does that look like? What does the progression look like from person who's never contacted us to screening client to somebody who's coming in for that first meeting to somebody who is executing documents and going out? And so that way the process becomes more repeatable. And when it becomes more repeatable, it can be done by people other than just me. The knowledge doesn't have to just be retained with me, because you look at the hotel, Four Seasons was founded in the 60s by Isidore Sharp in Toronto, Canada. Mr. Sharp has not checked anybody in a hotel in probably 40 years at least. The magic is not with any one person, and that's kind of what it needs to be with us. It's like, yes, there will be aspects that we are going to provide, but there are a lot of things that are going to be done through us, by us, that we can offload to make sure that our clients get taken care of. With that, I think I'm going to go ahead and end. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We'll have a talk on salt, and then a final